A woman sleeps in a car in the hospital parking lot. A family of 5 lives in a cramped RV. A worker had to rent a storage unit to keep their belongings because they could no longer afford rent. If you look at those images without knowing the location, many people might guess this is a developing country. But no, this is America, a country that possesses the largest economy in the world, a country that was once a symbol of opportunity, prosperity, and the American dream. So, how is it that in just a few years, more and more Americans have to live in conditions they previously believed only existed in poorer places? Why are people with jobs still homeless? Why do people with insurance still go bankrupt? And why do so many people start to feel that they are just one bill, one job loss, or one unexpected event away from a crisis? In the coming minutes, we will delve into a reality that is causing millions of Americans to worry. Third, world conditions are no longer a stranger, but are gradually becoming a part of everyday life in modern America. 20 years ago, when people mentioned the homeless, most of them envisioned a very specific group. They are the unemployed, the addicted, those with mental health issues, or those who have been completely pushed to the margins of society. Although that image does not fully reflect reality, it remains a common stereotype that many Americans have carried for decades. But what is happening today is completely different. And perhaps that is the first major shock of this story. In 2024, the United States recorded over 770,000 homeless people in a single night of counting, the highest level in modern history. That number is concerning in itself, but the more shocking thing lies behind the data. An increasing portion of those homeless individuals are still employed. They wake up every morning, go to work on time, pay taxes, settle bills, and try to live like any other ordinary citizen. The problem is that their jobs are no longer enough to keep a roof over their heads. Take a moment to think about that. For many years, Americans have been taught that hard work is the ticket out of poverty. But now, more and more people are discovering that the ticket is still in their hands. It's just that the train left the station at an unknown time. The first surprising point is this. Nowadays, a homeless person could be the one standing in front of you in line to buy morning coffee. They could be the delivery driver who just brought a package to your house. They could be salespeople, nurses, teaching assistants, or office workers. They don't live on the streets because they don't work. They live in cars, RVs, or makeshift rooms because the cost of living has risen faster than wages. And that's when the definition of poverty began to change. In the past, poverty was often seen as a lack of employment. Nowadays, poverty increasingly resembles a race where participants keep running, but the finish line keeps being pushed further away. You earn more money than a few years ago, but rent has increased even faster. You got a raise, but food, insurance, and utilities have increased even faster. In the end, it doesn't feel like we're making progress, but rather running on a treadmill with increasing speed. And this is what makes many people who watch videos like this feel uneasy. Because the story is no longer about them. It is gradually becoming us. When a full-time worker still has to sleep in their car, when a family with an income still has to live in an RV, the line between the middle class and financial instability begins to blur much more than people imagine. If you also feel that these kinds of stories have been appearing more frequently in recent years, please leave your comments below. Is this just a feeling? Or are you also witnessing something similar where you live? And if you find this topic worth discussing with many people, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support the channel. Because what we just talked about is just the tip of the iceberg. What is even more surprising is the reason why millions of workers still cannot keep a roof over their heads. And the answer starts with something that almost everyone needs, but fewer and fewer people can afford: housing. If the previous part surprised many people to learn that more and more employed individuals still fall into homelessness, then the next question is, what has happened to housing? How is it that in the richest country in the world, a roof over one's head has become something distant for millions of workers? Perhaps the simplest answer is this: housing was once built for people to live in, but nowadays, more and more people feel that housing is seen as a type of financial asset before being seen as a place to live. For most of the 20th century, a house had a very clear meaning. It is where a family begins their life, raises their children, hosts weekend dinners, and accumulates stability for the future. But in recent years, the house has increasingly resembled a stock rather than a home. Its value is tracked like a stock chart. People discuss return on investment, cash flow, and profits more than neighbors, community, or quality of life. While millions of Americans struggle to find affordable housing, there are neighborhoods where the number of homes purchased for investment or short-term rental is increasing. A paradox arises. The houses still stand, but the people who need homes cannot live in them. Imagine you are thirsty in the middle of the desert. In front of you, there are hundreds of bottles of water, but all of them are locked in glass cabinets, waiting for prices to rise. That is the feeling of many people when looking at the current housing market. As a result, more and more people have to resort to solutions that very few would have considered before. Living in a car, living in an RV, living off relatives' houses. Some people even have to turn storage rooms into temporary shelters. Sounds like a story from some deep economic crisis period. But this is the reality being recorded in many places across modern America. In the past, living in an RV was often promoted as a symbol of freedom, go anywhere, explore anywhere. But for many families today, RVs are not a dream adventure. It is plan B, and sometimes it's the last plan before having to sleep on the street. This touches on a very deep pain that many people in the comments section have mentioned. The issue is no longer real estate. The issue is dignity. Because when a person works hard for a whole month but still cannot afford to rent a small apartment, the feeling they get is not just financial pressure, that is the feeling of being pushed out of the game. Perhaps that's why more and more people say they don't feel poor, but feel powerless. They still work, still trying, still following the rules that society once promised would lead to stability. But the destination keeps moving further away each year. And perhaps this is the biggest question of this section. Should a house be a place to live or an asset to maximize profit? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. I really want to know the perspectives of those who are directly experiencing the housing market today. If you find this topic worth discussing with many people, please like and subscribe, because what we are about to talk about is even more shocking. Because housing is just part of the story. The next concern is that even those who still have a roof over their heads are living in an extremely precarious situation. Just an unexpected expense of a few $100s can push them into crisis. And that is exactly what we will explore in the next section. If the previous part shows that owning or renting a home is becoming increasingly difficult, then this part will talk about an even more concerning truth. Because sometimes, people don't lose their homes due to debts of tens of thousands of dollars. Sometimes, everything starts from just a very small number, $400. It doesn't sound like a large amount of money in an economy worth tens of trillions of dollars. Even many people could spend that amount on a short weekend trip or a new phone. But according to surveys by the Federal Reserve, a significant percentage of people cannot manage an emergency expense of $400 without borrowing or selling assets. Ironically, we are not talking about those who have been unemployed for a long time or are completely out of the labor market. We are talking about people who have jobs, have incomes, and still go to work every day. In other words, the gap between stability and crisis is sometimes just the cost of a car battery or an unexpected car repair. Imagine life as walking on a bridge. In the past, the American middle class had a financial cushion beneath them. If something unexpected happens, they still have savings to fall back on. But nowadays, for many families, that cushion has thinned to the point of almost disappearing. They still stand on the bridge, still move forward, but just one broken plank can change everything very quickly. And this is what makes many people in the comments section strongly empathize. No one goes bankrupt because of a $400 bill. But $400 is often the first domino. The car breaking down makes you miss work for a few days. Income decreases. The electricity bill is due. Credit cards started being used to fill the gap. Then came the interest rates. Then debt. And before they knew it, a small incident had turned into a major crisis. More notably, many Americans today no longer plan their finances for the future. They are planning to survive until the end of the month. It sounds like an exaggeration, but think about it. When you constantly have to ask yourself whether you have enough money to buy food, fill up your gas tank, or pay the bills, you no longer have the energy to think about retirement, investing, or the dream of owning your own home. And perhaps this is the most notable turnaround. For decades, the American dream has been built on the idea that hard work will help you get ahead. But for many people today, the feeling is not one of moving forward, but rather trying not to fall behind. They are not climbing the ladder of success. They are holding on to it so they don't fall. If you are watching this, please share sincerely in the comments, in your opinion, which unexpected expense is currently putting the most pressure on families? Housing, food, fuel, or something else? And if you find these stories reflecting the reality that many people are experiencing, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to help the video reach more people. But what's surprising is that even if a family still keeps their home and manages to handle such emergency expenses, there is still another worry that keeps millions of Americans awake at night. A system that should provide peace of mind when people are sick, but is becoming the biggest financial fear for many families. And that's exactly where we will go in the next part, the healthcare system. If the previous part showed that just a surprise expense of $400 could shake the lives of many families, then this part will talk about something even more frightening. Because there is a paradox that is making many Americans feel unfair. They are living in the most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet they are increasingly afraid to go for checkups. It sounds unbelievable, but just think about it. In most developed countries, when people get sick, they usually worry about their health first. For many Americans today, the first fear is the bill that will come afterward. Even on social media, more and more people joke, "I am not afraid of the hospital. I fear letters from the hospital." That's a humorous saying, but behind the laughter lies an uncomfortable reality. There are cases where just a few days in the hospital result in bills amounting to tens of thousands of dollars. There are families with full health insurance who still carry medical debts that last for many years. This creates a very strange feeling. Insurance is supposed to be an umbrella against the rain, but many people feel they are still getting wet as usual, only the umbrella is very expensive. And it is here that a very strong insight begins to emerge. In many comments under videos about the American economy, people continuously mention the same fear. "I am not afraid of getting sick. I'm afraid I won't have enough money to get sick." Just thinking about it is enough to see how much everything has changed. Because illness is something no one wants, but at least it is beyond our choice. And the financial burden after medical treatment is a pressure that lasts for months, even years. And what surprises people even more is the invisible impact of this system. Many people do not dare to quit their jobs, change careers, or even pursue better opportunities, simply because they fear losing the health insurance provided by the company. Imagine a person who knows they could earn more money elsewhere, but still has to stay in their current job because a family member needs medication or regular treatment. At that point, insurance is not just an expense, it becomes the thread that tightly binds life's decisions. The noteworthy thing is that this story does not only affect the poor, it affects the middle class as well, those who on paper seem stable. They have jobs, income, rented houses, or houses on mortgage. But just one unexpected diagnosis, one surgery, or one health crisis in the family can completely disrupt the entire financial plan. If you are watching this, please let me know in the comments. Do you think medical expenses are becoming one of the biggest concerns for families today? And if you find these stories worth sharing, please hit like and subscribe. Because the next part will delve into something even bigger than housing or healthcare. Because in the end, what many Americans feel they are losing is not just money, not the house, not insurance, but rather something much more intangible, the belief that the system is still working for them, and that is where the story begins to become truly profound. If we look at everything we've talked about so far, rising housing prices, workers living in their cars, emergency expenses that can upend lives, or the fear of hospital bills, many people would think this is simply a financial crisis. But perhaps what many Americans are really losing is not money, but rather it's trust. It sounds abstract, but pay attention to something very interesting in the thousands of comments under the videos on this topic. Very few people say, "I failed." Instead, more and more people say things like, "We were misled," "We did everything the right way," or more simply, "The system no longer works as it used to." For decades, The American dream was not really a house or a car. At its core, it is a promise that if you study hard, work seriously, obey the law, and take responsibility for your life, you will have the opportunity to advance. No one promises you will be rich, but people promise that effort will be rewarded. And it is here that the feeling of unease begins to emerge, because many people today do not feel they are losing the game due to laziness or lack of effort. They feel like they are running in a race where the rules keep changing, like a mountain climber discovering the peak being raised higher each time they get closer. This does not only happen to low-income individuals, it appears in the middle class as well. Those with a university degree, those with stable careers, those who once believed they were on the right path, they still work, still paying taxes, still paying bills. But it is becoming increasingly difficult to feel that their lives are better than they were 5 or 10 years ago. And when that lasts too long, something very dangerous begins to emerge: the breakdown of social trust. Not the trust in a specific individual or organization, but the trust that the system can still deliver fair results for those who play by the rules. There is a rather interesting saying: money is like gasoline in a car. When you have enough, you rarely think about it. But when it's about to run out, all thoughts revolve around it. The same is happening with faith. For many years, Americans didn't need to talk much about the American dream because they believed it existed. But as more and more people begin to question whether their children will live better than they did, it is a sign that the reservoir of faith is gradually running dry. If you agree that the biggest crisis may not lie in money but in trust, please leave a comment below. In your opinion, what is causing people to lose faith the most these days? Housing, medical expenses, or do you feel that working hard no longer yields the same results as before? Because the next part will lead us to an even bigger question. If so many people have started to lose faith in the future, what will happen when an entire generation begins to feel that America is no longer the America they grew up with? And that's where the emotions of this story truly reach their peak. Perhaps this is the most emotional part of the entire story, because after all the numbers about housing, inflation, or medical costs, what lingers in the minds of many Americans is not a specific bill, it's a feeling that is increasingly appearing in conversations, on social media, and under videos like this. America is no longer the America it used to be. At first glance, it may seem like just a nostalgic saying, but when millions of people say the same thing, it is no longer nostalgia. It becomes a signal of a profound change in society. In the past, there were milestones that most Americans considered normal. Graduation, going to work, buy the first house, start a family, having children, retire with a stable life. Not everyone achieves everything, but most believe that those things are within reach if they try hard enough. What makes the American dream is not that everyone is wealthy. What makes the American dream is the belief that the future will be better than the present, that children will live better than their parents, that each generation will take a step forward. But nowadays, more and more young people are starting to look at the future in the opposite direction. Housing is more expensive, the cost of raising children is higher, education is more expensive, retirement is harder, and for the first time in decades, many people are no longer sure that their children's lives will be easier than their own. It's not just an economic change, that is a psychological change. Many people postpone getting married, postponing having children, postponing buying a house, postponing all long-term plans. Not because they don't want to, but because they don't feel safe enough to make those decisions. Think about this. When a generation does not dare to plan for the next 10 years, they will only focus on the next month. When they don't think about the future, they gradually lose the motivation to invest in the future. And that's when a society begins to enter a very dangerous state: survival instead of development. There is a quite fitting metaphor. A society is like a long train moving forward. People accept the difficulties of the present as long as they believe the train is heading in the right direction. But when more and more passengers start looking out the window and are no longer sure where the train is headed, the anxiety will spread faster than any financial crisis. That's why so many comments no longer revolve around money. They talk about fatigue. They talk about the future. They talk about the feeling of being lost. And deep down beneath all of that is a very simple yet very heartbreaking question. If we do everything right but still can't move forward, what else can we do? If you're watching this, let me know in the comments. In your opinion, what has changed the most in the past 10 or 20 years? Cost of living, economic opportunities, or faith in the future? Because the conditions of the third world do not actually start from deteriorating roads or makeshift camps. It starts from something much more intangible, something that, when lost, even the wealthiest countries can feel fragile. And that is exactly what we will talk about next. After everything we've talked about from the beginning of the video until now, perhaps it's time to ask an uncomfortable but necessary question. What is the third world really? Many people would think it is the dilapidated roads, the shantytowns, the overcrowded hospitals, or the low wages. But history shows that many countries that were once poor can still thrive when their people believe that tomorrow will be better than today. On the contrary, a country can be very rich on paper but starts to face problems when that trust disappears. And that might be the biggest surprise of this whole story. What increasingly worries more and more Americans is not just housing prices or medical bills. It's the feeling that they can no longer see a way out. Workers have jobs but are still homeless. Patients have insurance but still fear going for checkups. Young people don't dare to have children. Older people are not sure if they can retire. Those stories may sound different, but they all lead to the same point, a feeling of losing control over the future. There is a very fitting image. A society is like a long bridge spanning many generations. People accept traversing the bumpy paths if they believe the bridge still leads to a better place. But when more and more people start to doubt whether that bridge still leads anywhere, fear will emerge. Not the fear of poverty, but it's the fear that no matter how hard you try, nothing will change. A country does not weaken just because its GDP drops by a few percentage points. A country begins to become fragile when millions of people simultaneously lose faith that the future can be better than the present. That's why many people say, America is no longer America, not because the buildings disappeared, not because the economy has come to a halt, but because the promise that once connected many generations is now being questioned. If you have followed along this far, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. In your opinion, what is the most concerning issue right now? The cost of living, housing, healthcare, or the loss of faith in the future? Because the story of America is not just the story of America itself. And that will also be what we discuss in the conclusion. And perhaps that is the most thought-provoking aspect of the entire story. What we just talked about is not just a story about housing, healthcare, or living costs. It's the story of what happens when more and more people feel the gap between effort and reward is widening. When faith in the future becomes more fragile, even the largest economies can face very real challenges. But this is also the time we want to hear your opinions. In your opinion, what is the biggest issue right now? Housing, healthcare costs, wages, or the loss of faith in the future? And do you feel that today's America is different from the America you once knew? Please share your perspective in the comments, as discussions like this often bring many thought-provoking viewpoints. If you find the video useful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos about economic and social trends and the changes happening around the world. And finally, a small note. This video is made for the purpose of analyzing, discussing, and summarizing economic and social trends from various data sources, stories, and public opinions. The content is not intended to attack any individual, organization, or political viewpoint. The goal of the video is to encourage dialogue, critical thinking, and to provide viewers with additional perspectives on current issues of interest. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.